What works for me and has changed the trajectory of my life are the little moments. If you aren't failing, you aren't living that life of courage. And that right there, that boils down to a decision of how you're going to live your life. And are you going to build your life in alignment with your values, or going back to the culture, what the culture expects from you and the pressure they put on you? I'm trying to do all of these other things. I'm trying to learn and be better. But again, it came back to this performance.
Dr. J, welcome to the podcast.
I'm so happy to be here.
Likewise, I'd love to get right into it with a deep question. How do people find hope when they're in the midst of chaos and everything seems to be going in the opposite way that they want?
Oh, dang. We're starting right away. Okay, so before I directly answer that, maybe you could think of, and I'm going to think of a time, and if when you're listening in right now, I want you to think about a time where you felt hopeless. And maybe there was nothing that happened to build up to that moment that you thought like it just maybe came out of nowhere, or maybe you saw it coming. But hope, when you realize how detrimental being hopeless is, there's a way to that hopelessness. So that's how we have to know right off the bat that there's a way back to hope. So there's a way to hopelessness. So knowing right off the bat that there's a way back to hope is a power in itself. That is a way, like, you have to first know that it's possible. And I'm going to debunk a few things real quick that will maybe prevent you or get in the way of thinking hope, having hope again is possible in the midst of wherever you're at. You don't have to be happy to have hope. And it's not this false positivity thing. We talked about it being earlier off screen or off air, it not being like this Pollyanna perfect thing. It's not this little tight bow where it's this beautiful thing that you're all positive. Hope does not mean happy, and you don't have to have a ton of it. And I think that's the biggest misperception, is if you're not feeling super hopeful like you would imagine, then maybe that it's not going to serve you. You just have to have a little bit of hope, and that can redirect the trajectory of the moment you're in.
And so how does somebody get a little bit of hope? Like, what do they cling on to in moments like that?
Well, the first thing you do is, I say you can't have hope without honesty. So there's different habits in hope, and they're emotional habits, because the biggest block for us to have hope is our feelings, because we know when we have hope and we know when we don't. It all comes down to a feeling. I can tell you hope is a cognitive science, but really your experience with it is going to be how you feel about it. So that's why we go back to emotional habits of hope, because if we don't untangle and identify and reroute, if we need to, the feelings we have, our feelings are going to continue to from experiencing hope. So the book, The 5 Habits of Hope, and my work is really about helping people have a process to process their feelings, because that's what we're not taught. That's what we don't have. That's what I didn't have growing up. I had to learn in real time, hard-earned lessons of what the heck do you do when you just got suspended from college, you're on an athletic scholarship, and you are being forced to go to a rehab program before you're even old enough to drink. And rebuilding for me started with being honest with my feelings. And then as I started to grow in my professional life and in my personal life and in my faith, I was realizing that the millions of people I was working with throughout my career, everyone was wondering, how the heck do we have hope in all this hardship? So that's really the journey of the emotional habits of hope, is building that muscle, that mindset muscle, to keep going back to hope, because there's a process again to be hopeless. So we build a process back to hope.
And I love what you said about honesty. I think that it can be tough for people to be truly honest with themselves. And I think it's even more challenging when they've either made some sort of horrible mistake, or they're in a place they don't want to be in their life. And it's like their self-esteem, their confidence is so shattered. And it's just tough to beat themselves down a little bit more by just being honest about either where their life's at or a mistake they've made. Like, how can people develop courage in those moments to have a glimmer of of bravery so that they can get to that point of honesty. Because I think that so many people become trapped in that moment and they're afraid to be honest because they just don't want, they can't tolerate any more pain in their life.
Yes, that's hitting a spot. Okay. So the first thing that I would say is every single person has courage. And imagine if every single one of us had the same amount of courage. Okay. If every person had the same amount of courage within them, and we also have fear, and we have doubt, and we have worry, and we have insecurities, and we have control issues, and we have all the other things, right? And basically, what it is if you have fear and you have courage, it's deciding in that moment, can I just lean a little more into the courage today? But it's not denying the fear. And I think that's what happens is we get into what I call a cycle of silence by going on what I call feeling detours, where we will deny the feeling, dismiss the feeling, distract ourselves, be defensive about it. And it's acknowledging it's there, but just also and acknowledging I do have courage, I do have worth, I do have, and it's, I'm not going to always feel more courageous every day, right? But it's like in that moment, can I just see that I'm also courageous and maybe lean a little bit more into that? But I think what we do is we put the pressure on ourselves to be super courageous or super confident or super determined or all those things. And again, it's the slight breaks in our thought cycles that are harmful, that are most like that are going to propel us in the long game. And we know this even about fitness, right? Like it's not, you're not going to see results right away when you're in the long game. It's the subtle things. And so when we can break the thought cycle, what we do is we reshape the neural pathways in our mind. And we have the power to do that by interrupting the negative, harmful ones. And fear isn't necessarily a harmful one, but we are reacting in that way, responding in that way. So if we can redirect the fear by saying, I am terrified because I feel like a loser, but I am a really thoughtful husband. And again, right there, I just broke it and now I'm rerouting it. And now
Mm.
it has the possibility to be reshaped.
Do you think that it takes like some sort of action or a dramatic shift in someone's life, or small dramatic shift, I guess I should say, for them to kind of believe in themselves? Or do you think like just these simple shifts in mindset are enough to like make lasting change come about?
I mean, whatever works for you, but for me, what works for me and has changed the trajectory of my life are the little moments. I like to call them maybe moments. So, for example, I was in a situation where I was in a really unhealthy relationship and I was running out of a situation in the middle of the night. We're both pretty like wasted. I'm call a friend to come get me. I go to my friend who's driving me home. So I'm like escaping an unsafe situation with an ex-partner and I get in the car, they're driving me home and they didn't really say anything. And then we get to my house and they just looked at me and they said, "You know, you could be anything you want to be." And this was in a time where I thought I was like the worst person on the planet, the stupidest, the ugliest, the like all the things where shame was literally silencing any like courage that I had, where I was at the lowest of the low. And they just said that. And I didn't believe it. I did not believe it. But what it did, what it planted was this. So if you're listening, I want you to take this away. Maybe, maybe I can. Maybe I am deserving of a healthy relationship. Maybe I will go back to school because I had dropped out. I'm a 3-time dropout, all right? Maybe there is purpose to my life. Maybe. And that maybe moment broke a cycle. It broke a thought cycle. And it didn't change everything right away, but that's not what hope is about. Having hope doesn't magically solve problems. It activates the parts of the brain that help us solve them. It fuels our motivation, our emotional regulation, and our ability to plan and strategize. It makes healing possible.
And I think what trips people up, especially like if they're in their 20s or their 30s, is that people they hit this point where they feel like they failed in some area of their life and they feel like they're so far behind. And they feel like there's
I
so
can
much
relate.
more, there's so much more they need to be doing. to get back to that place that they're supposed to be at.
Mm.
Um, how can people navigate that? When they're, hitting a point in their life where maybe they lost their job, or they've lost a relationship that they were in for a long time, or health concerns, and they feel like they have a lot of catching up to do.
Okay, first of all, that's just a lot of pressure. I like if you think about it, when you're in that place, you feel pressure, expectations, pressure to perform. And I can't not talk about the culture of that, the culture of performance and projection and perfection, because that's what the heart of it is. And that's where we get comparison culture from, where we get cancel culture from, where we get the culture of we're going to consume and not contribute. That's where all of that really stems from, is this like high performance, like push, like pressure. So for me, it comes back to I've lost jobs, I've lost relationships, I've lost opportunities, I have restarted more times than you can even imagine. I have failed so much because I live a life of faith and courage. And so if you aren't failing, you aren't living that life of courage. And that right there, that boils down to a decision of how you're going to live your life. And are you going to build your life in alignment with your values, or going back to the culture, what the culture expects from you and the pressure they put on you and the pedestal they want you to create or build or innovate or solve problems from? So for me, it goes back to alignment with values. So for example, if I never I wrote a book 10, 12 years ago. That didn't reach some sort of success. It was more like a poetic journal that was published than anything. But if I didn't go through that process and have that whatever kind of failure you want to say, then I wouldn't have been the person who was brave in doing that. So no matter the outcome, if you are brave a little more than you are afraid with the decision you make, then I believe you will maybe not like the outcome, but you will like the person you're becoming.
How do people become more courageous in their everyday life? Like, what's at the root of that?
Your courage, first of all, it's believing again that you have it in you. And it's creating a process where you constantly activate it in the tiny moments and the big moments. So, for example, only you know what you hold back in. But if we don't recognize and build awareness on the temptations to keep us from holding back, from going deeper in a relationship, from pushing ourselves, say in the gym, or our physical health, our spiritual health and well being, our personal goals, only we know the temptations we personally experience to hold back that courage. So again, it's going back to honesty. What is holding me back, and how can I interrupt the thought cycle? Because we're associating actions with identity. That's what needs to be broken. If I do this, then I'm a good person. If I do this, I am a sexy person. If I do this, I'm a smart person. We're associating success with outcomes instead of identity and alignment of values. And that distinction is very important if we want to sustain health. I think self-help for me doesn't work. It's like self-health that I need to focus on. And it's always in a constant internal navigation. And how do I keep developing tools and processes so I can stay honest, so I can stay hopeful, and so I can stay hardworking towards the person that is aligned with my values, not the world and the culture's pressure and expectations. And that's how courage continues to come out, because it's now who I am. I've accepted it. And it's like, am I just going to choose it a little more today? Or am I going to allow the temptations to withhold it, keep me from doing it? And it's okay if I got to give myself grace in the moments, the many moments I'm not courageous, but it's not my identity. I'm not a failure because of an external result. I think that discourages people.
What's like the biggest limiting belief you think cause people to not believe in themselves and be courageous? Like, I know for me, my identity when I was younger was wrapped up in the idea that I was a failure. And that because I accepted that identity, my choices and my beliefs reflected that. Is that the most, I mean, I hear that a lot. So is that the most common, or do you think there's one that is a little bit more like talked about when it comes to people limiting themselves?
Well, it's funny, I actually discovered this in the work that I do. So I am a keynote speaker. I travel all around and I work with organizations, schools, universities, families, mental health professionals. And um, what I don't do a traditional lecture. I'm not a lecturer, even though sometimes that's what it's called. I do a lot of live facilitation in real time. And I did this exercise one time. I remember where I was. I was in Florida, and this this student comes on stage, and in the activity that I was doing, I had already written a note in this envelope that said, "You are enough." And so they didn't know anything about it. I wrote that note. I felt prompted to do it. So I did it. I put it in a note. Then they do this whole exercise. And at the end of the exercise, I have them open the note, and they opened it. And I'll never forget the reaction. She she literally looked at it and she turned her head away and she covered her face with her mouth, or with her mouth with her hand, and she was trying not to cry. And I had no idea that that was going to have that react. I had no idea. This was the first time I was doing it. And then she comes back to it and she looks at it and she does it again. She turns away and puts her hand over her mouth. And then I was like, "Take a deep breath." And she took a deep breath in front of thousands of peers, by the way. And she said it to herself. And it was like she broke free. And that feeling not good enough, or just never being enough, you do all the work, you do all the things, and it really boils down to an identity crisis of not feeling enough. And there's three reasons we will struggle in silence about these things. One, we don't want to be a burden. Two, we don't want to look weak. And three, we think no one cares. And so it keeps us in the cycle of struggling with that feeling of maybe worthlessness and not being enough, in a place of isolation and silence, which just propels the feeling. It's when we interrupt it in those subtle ways, maybe I am enough. So even if she couldn't feel it in that moment, I would just gently say, like, just say maybe. Maybe I'm good enough. Maybe I'm smart enough. Maybe I'm loved enough. Maybe I'm creative enough. Maybe I am bold enough. Maybe my voice matters. Maybe I am helping people with this podcast, which you are. And it's those maybe moments that keep building the emotional habits that get us back to a place of expectation and hope.
What are some of the biggest like emotional habits that you see people do on a day-to-day basis or on a weekly basis that like diminish the hope in their life?
I would, the biggest one in our culture today is, because of the climate of social media, what we do is we consume and we don't contribute. We don't take what I call an emotional risk, which is habit number 3. But the emotional risks aren't there. So basically what's happening is we have an innate desire for relationships, friendships, romance, even relationships at work or in school, peers. Like we want relationships, we crave it. And we go online to the places where there are people. And what's happening there though is it's not two-sided. You can't have a real-time relationship on social media. Yes, you can find a partner in love. Yes, you can build like a community. I'm not denying those things, but the actual real-time relationships that we innately crave and desire can't happen online. Not in the social spaces as they are, especially not with AI right now. You don't even know if you're talking to someone real right now, okay? But this is real, right? We are real people. But the biggest thing I think they're not taking a risk in their relationships. Because, for example, if you and I were, if you asked me through a DM, "Hey, how are you doing?" I could say, "I'm good," right? I can write that back in a DM. But if you and I are in real time, in person, if you can be in person, which would be great, or an audio or whatever you got to do, FaceTime, if you heard my voice quiver and I said, "I'm good," changes everything.
And I think that I believe one of the other things that kind of trips people up is hustle culture. And I think it can be confusing because I do think you have to like work incredibly hard to achieve something. You know, you and I, we've both, you know, shared something that we've been working on, right? And that has been incredibly meaningful, but challenging, blah, blah, blah. Um, you know, I do think you have to like work hard to be able to achieve certain things. However, I also think that people end up taking that to an extreme and they sacrifice personal relationships, they sacrifice their health, they sacrifice their mental health. How can people have a healthy relationship with like purpose and meaning without taking it too far?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, hard work, if hard work is hurting you or the ones you love, then I would reevaluate if it, like, that's a great way to measure it. Is it hurting me or someone I love? Is the hard work hurting more than it's healthy? It's a great evaluation that you just pointed out. When I'm not a fan of hard work culture in the sense of like, back to because of expectations and pressure and performance. I think the hard work for me really goes down to the internal work because no matter the success I achieve and the external outcomes that I achieve, if I don't have healthy relationships with the people I love most, who mean the most to me, if they don't get the best of me, if they don't get me present with them, and if I don't have a healthy relationship with myself and with my faith, then all of the external things, they're void to me. And so my measure is constantly to go back to health internally and in the relationships that I have and not measuring by external outcomes. And it's basically contradictive to our culture. I don't work hard for some people work hard for specific things, but if you get that specific thing and then still you can't even communicate with your kid without screaming at them, then that's just about reevaluating and pivoting. You don't even have to like, really you don't have to be hard on yourself. It's just like, "Oh, I'm gonna be aware. I'm gonna have a reflection moment," which is habit number 1, and I'm going to maybe see if I need to pivot a little bit here. Maybe is there a way that I can not juggle and balance, but I can align hard work with a value of an outcome instead of just a value of a thing that might not have more meaning to it than just something shiny and fancy.
I definitely want to like get into a real life example of the 5 R's. Because
Love it.
your 5 habits, right? To be able to like reimagine yourself in a more hopeful scenario. But first, bring me back to like your own story. Like I know you turned your life around when you were younger. I know you struggled with your mental health. You were an athlete. Like talk about like who Dr. J was before becoming Dr. J.
Oh, I was just on the phone with someone who was a part of my journey since then, like since the beginning, knew me when I was a teenager. And he was like, Chica, you got to keep reminding yourself who you were before you were Dr. J. Literally, that's what they said. So this is such a great prompt. Um, they were there for a lot of it, and it was such a time, and I still struggle, just so you know. I still have things in my family where people struggle with mental illness, or people struggle with addiction, where people don't have places to live and are unhoused. Like I still struggle with things in my personal life, so this isn't to say that that's not the thing. What now, I just have like a toolkit to keep hope through these situations and to have a peace through them. But I never thought I would make it alive to my 20s. Never thought about, like, a family and what I would say, like, a home with a white picket fence. Like, those things weren't things I thought about because I didn't think I would be alive to have them. I had experienced my family was incredibly selfless and loving and kind, but they had a lot of struggles and we had a lot of trauma in my childhood. Um, Addictions, people going to jail, overdoses, losing people I loved. One of the most pivotal moments for me that I'm very public about is my cousin Sean, who was like a brother to me. He passed away from drugs when he was 19 and I was 18, and he was like my brother. So that was a huge moment in my life that derailed me. Like it took me out. I was I would do anything. I would drink, I would do drugs, I would be in unhealthy relationships, and I'm also very high performing at the same time. I'm a full-time, like, college athlete. I'm very active in all the organizations. I was probably I think I was on the newspaper team. I was on, I'm in all the clubs. So I'm very high performing, but also deeply hurting and like hanging on by a thread. And the place that I got where I was suspended, again, I was forced into rehab at like 20. And it was a place where I turned to self-help books, I turned to the Bible, I turned to going back to school and learning about these things, my mind, I turned to talk therapy, I turned to all these things, and I stopped doing certain things, like, I stopped doing the drugs, I stopped hanging out with certain people, I stopped doing things, and I'm trying to do all these other things, I'm trying to learn and be better, but again, it came back to this performance. It was like all a performance, I was trying to get better, I couldn't just be present and be honest with myself. I was just doing all of these things to learn about my mind, to fix my mind, to stop doing that, and I wasn't just being honest. And that's where I really had to start. And when I did, it was painful, but it was so freeing because I survived it. And sometimes I'll tell people that. They'll like tell something to me that was very deeply difficult and they're so brave in opening up to me and then they take a deep breath and I'm like, "Can I pinch you? Like, y you're still here." And it was Oh, go ahead. It started with writing because I did not want anyone to think I had problems or was weak. I thought that that made me look stupid or vulnerable, and I don't like that. I didn't like to cry in front of people. I didn't like anyone to know any of my business. So it's crazy that I'm in this profession right now because I was the most private person ever. And it was a process of writing because I didn't like to talk. I didn't want to talk. So I wrote, then I did talk therapy, and that was fundamental. Building my faith was critical, and establishing depth in relationships I did have, and then kind of maybe beginning new ones on a more authentic starting place was also part of it as well. And that is what I call positioning. So I was positioning myself to meet new people, which took a risk, which was uncomfortable. But I kept doing it. I kept showing up to places. Like, for example, instead of going to the bar, I went to bookstores. It sounds like it wasn't a monumental shift, y'all. It was just a simple repositioning. Instead of taking a shot of tequila, I took a ginger shot. Not monumental, y'all. Just these little subtle shifts that were aligning to a value system. In that, I wanted to know who could I become if I were healthier emotionally, because I got the scholarship. I was getting offers to do work in New York City, which was my dream, but I hated myself internally. So none of that was going to it wasn't going to fill the hole inside of me. I had to get to a place where I was building a life by discovering who I was capable of being if I were honest, healthy, and hopeful. What would that look like? Who would I look like?
We will get you back to this episode of the Adversity Advantage in just 1 second, but first, I want to give a quick shout out to today's sponsor, Timeline Nutrition. Some of my main priorities right now are optimizing my health, wellness, and longevity. And as many of you know, I've been a fan of Timeline Nutrition and MitoPure for a really long time, especially these new longevity gummies. And right now, Timeline has a special offer that you can get 20% off your first Timeline purchase. And there's never been a better time to experience the benefits of MitoPure. And if you use my code Doug at checkout, you will receive 20% off today. If you've been thinking about trying Timeline, this is your sign. Once again, they're offering my audience a 20% discount on all first-time purchases. So use code Doug at checkout to get 20% off, or go to timeline.com/Doug to get 20% off. Again, timeline.com/Doug to get 20% off your first purchase of MitoPure and Timeline Nutrition. Now back to the show.
Thanks for sharing. And thanks for being so vulnerable. I mean, I can't imagine how tough that must be to kind of revisit and talk about. Thanks for being so open. I do want to talk about your framework because I think, we can talk about stories, we can talk about certain tips. I think what really helps people is to give somebody like a real life scenario and then take your framework and see how we can apply it.
Okay.
Right?
Do you want to be the guinea pig?
Sure.
Okay, cool. We'll go through the framework. It could probably even take like 2 minutes. All
Yeah,
right.
we'll be the guinea pig, and I think the real life example I want to use is when I was in jail, and I can articulate how I think I changed my life, but I would love for you to maybe walk me through how you would have done it, knowing what you know about my situation.
Hmm. Okay. Well, it's a beautiful place to start.
So,
In that it's honest.
yeah. Well, and it's probably, the thing I talk about the most, and the thing that I think people like want to know is like, how do you rebuild from rock bottom? So, paint a picture of my
That's your
situation.
brand? Because that should probably, I don't know if that's on your brand, rebuild from rock bottom. I love wordplay. I love that. It felt so natural. So you should definitely love that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it is kind of a big part of what we talk about. But um I think that, so I'm in jail, convicted felon, drug addict at the time, selling drugs, 50 pounds overweight, no real relationships, bunch of jobs. You can see where I'm going with this. My life was completely chaotic. Like I was in the 0.01% of like bad, right? Um, how would you apply your 5-step framework to take someone like myself in a situation like that
Okay, let's
and
do it.
rebuild my life?
All right, let's go through this one by one. So every emotional habit of hope that I share in the book comes accompanied with what I call a feeling framework, and it's a prompt to help us visit it. So the first one, and you could just complete the sentence. I like to take people through like a writing exercise of doing it, but if you're listening, you could just think through it. So the first prompt in the feeling framework is I was struggling because. So you can, if you want, you can complete that sentence.
I was struggling because I didn't know who I was. I was struggling because I didn't have any hope that I was going to be able to make it out. I was struggling because I was, doing things to numb the pain that I was afraid of facing.
The next prompt is, and this supports the second habit, which is risk taking, is I felt.
I felt super lost. I felt lonely. I felt hopeless. I felt like no one was going to understand where I was coming from.
The next prompt, when you're ready, is I needed.
I needed direction, and I needed confidence in my ability to change, and confidence that things were going to be okay.
There's 2 more prompts, so you're doing amazing. The next one is I stayed silent because.
I stayed silent because I was afraid that people were going to judge me. I stayed silent because I didn't think people would care. I stayed silent because I didn't realistically. I stayed silent because I didn't realistically think that I was going to be able to survive, live to see past my 25th birthday. So I thought, what was the point?
And the final one is I am hopeful for.
In that situation,
Mhm.
I am hopeful for the fact that I'm still alive and that I have a chance, and that I got this gift to be incarcerated and to start working out and to find fitness, and that if I just do the necessary things each and every day, it'll give me a chance to change my life.
Whew. I want to just, I wish I could like in person just give you a hug.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm gonna, if it's okay, can I read a few more from people that anonymously contribute these in my work? This person shares, this is a first grade teacher who says, I struggle because my husband cheated. I felt ugly, not good enough. I needed to know it wasn't my fault. I stayed silent because I was afraid to be judged. Um, this person struggled, and these are all anonymous. I struggled because I felt like an imposter. I didn't feel like I knew enough or was able to take care of what I needed to. I felt helpless, alone. I needed someone to validate me and remind me that I am capable and qualified. I stayed silent because I thought if I shared my feelings, people would think I was an attention seeker. I am hopeful that I can move past this feeling and succeed in what is asked of me. I mean, people share, I've heard hundreds of thousands of things from assault and abuse to addiction to just feeling not good enough, to feeling worthless, to struggling with shame, forgiveness, struggling with relationships, feeling lonely. And you know what's interesting is at the end of the exercise, so I'm going to ask you, and what I ask people is if you'd like to hold on to it, you're more than welcome. But I'm going to invite you, if you want and are ready and willing, to let it go. And they physically will, I'm ruffling paper because they'll pass them in and let them go. But here's what's the big thing that I experience from that is almost every time after I do this exercise, someone will come up to me afterwards with a crumpled up piece of paper and say, I couldn't let it go before, but I want to let it go now. And what I'll do is I'll look them in the eye and I'll say, I don't even need to read it. The power is in you letting it go, which is the power of releasing so that you make space to receive. In your situation that you were talking about, you were externally in a situation where you were imprisoned, right? You were locked up, right? But what we do is our mind is locked up. Our courage is caged. Our feelings are imprisoned by us, and they are serving a lifetime sentence. We are punishing ourselves for bad things we've done, for relationships maybe we weren't the best in, for the way we treat our bodies. We punish ourselves and we put ourselves in prison in our mind. Thank God you are where you're at now. What a beautiful freaking story of transformation and blessing. And I know so many people want to know how you got from A to Z, but really, even if you got out of jail, if you're still in a mental prison, what was it for? Are we really living? And I actually learned this while working in a prison. I worked with men who were serving life sentences. And I have never felt hope more than in that space. And it was crazy. It was like I physically looked nothing like them. They were all men. They were mostly men of color. They were serving life sentences in prison from all kinds of things, from murder to drugs. This is before drugs were legal, all kinds of things. And not all drugs are legal, right? Just a little point there. But they were in for life, most of them. And they were so joyful and so at peace and so grateful for the time we were sharing together. And the way that they gave me hope, even behind bars, man, it made me realize how freaking powerful it is, because everything else could be taken from them or whatever, but no one was going to steal that, the hope in their spirit. That maybe them being in there, part of their hope and their purpose was the guys coming in, that they were going to minister to them or they were going to help them just get in a better space, physically, health, like mentally, whatever. They still had a purpose. So whatever situation you're in, everything has a purpose. There's no waste in anything. And there is a process back to hope.
I really appreciate you sharing the kind words, and I'm really blessed to be, where I'm at right now. And it's been an amazing journey. I'm just glad to be able to have a platform and be able to talk to people like you. And, this is kind of going to be a good way to segue into a topic we may or may not agree on, but I'm interested to see where this goes. I chalk up a lot of my ability to change to resilience, to being able to sustain and embrace discomfort, the suck, doing hard things, showing up when I didn't want to, taking full accountability when life didn't go my way, moving forward anyway. And I know you kind of have a slightly different perspective on resilience. I would love to hear your thoughts on the relationship between hope and resilience,
Mm,
and where do you see people going wrong when it comes to discomfort?
mm. Well, dang, that was a lot. And I think I'll start with where they're going wrong. We'll go backwards. So comfort is a confusing place because it's cozy. We get to know it. And when we look to build a life of comfort, it's really difficult to discover what we're capable of because the cozy keeps us in. I always think of it, a blanket is so comfortable. My sweats, my slippers, my blanket. The cozy can confuse us. But there's also, I think, where resilience can get a little bit into, I think, a path of like performance mode is when we don't actually rest in comfort ever. Because I think it's again about alignment. Is my value someone who's present? And if I'm always pushing myself and if I'm always in growth mode, that's exhausting. Where's my value to rest and be present and recover? It's not a value system, then I think that's where resilience can get dangerous. Because we get into a push yourself, growth mode. I am probably low key one of the scrappiest, hardworking people you may ever meet, but I'm super chill and at peace because I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm not trying to push myself outwards. I'm trying to be present and process things inward so that I can enjoy the outwards thing. So I can enjoy the relationships I have, whether it's with my parents, my siblings, my kids, my husband, my friends. It If I'm always in growth mode, then I'm going to go places, but I'm not going to really be present.
Right.
And that's where I think
That
it
makes
gets a little tricky.
Yeah. So you do think that, so you do believe in resilience.
Oh yeah, I just think
It's more
we
just a
just
way.
teeter it. I think what happened is culture captured it and was like, let's market it. And then all of these influencer voices, which I love and are very helpful. But I think we're missing the conversation about rest and recovery in the sustainability of resilience.
Got it. Yeah, I'm totally in line with that. 'Cause I do think that we struggle with like the what's next mentality,
Mm-hmm.
and you have your mind on something else. I mean, one of the things that we've implemented into our relationship is, I was somebody that when we would travel, I'd have my computer and I would be like, hey, I have an episode coming out on Saturday. Like, I need my computer to make sure that everything gets uploaded. And she's like, just get it done before, and
I love her.
she's like, it's awkward for me to sit here, like we're in a hotel and then just watch you work. And it hit me. And I think it hit me just because I was like, man, you never think about it like that. You never think about how it's going to impact someone else. You think you're doing the right thing because you're grinding, trying to build something. But then it's like, at what expense, at what cost, right? And I think that it's tough because if you're somebody who just solely focuses on personal relationships and no career, you're not going to have very many personal relationships because, you're not going to be inspired to be around someone who sits on the couch all day and does nothing, right? That being said, we need nuance. We need an approach that's different. And I think that we have to look at it from kind of like an objective view and be like, okay, like, where can I make adjustments to make sure that this is going to be sustainable for me, like long term? Because at the end of the day, it's like anytime you're like with your partner or you're with your kids or you're with whoever and you're just focused on work all the time, like that's not a good thing. There's going to be times where I think if there's like a fire, then you're going to be focused on it. And I think that's okay because I mean, it's just a natural thing. If like there's like immediate thing going I need to take care of. But generally speaking, if you're just constantly like, okay, like what's next? Or I got to do this other thing. Like, I just think your personal relationships are going to falter and then you'll be miserable at the end of your life.
I think there's a link between doing and being. I think we can just get really like a lot more clear about the link between the two and how they inform and form and shape each other. I just focus on what I do and not who I am, then that's where it becomes imbalanced. And imbalance creates crisis in any situation, work, personal, relational. So anytime there's an imbalance in something. And so the idea is to make sure that we don't just focus on what we do, but who we are, and who we are informs what we do. And recognizing the link. And I think what we focus on one or the other instead of how they form each other. And then that's why you get into a situation where you're doing something and it doesn't feel right. Something doesn't feel right about it, is because it's not a representation and in alignment with who you want to be, who you want to continue to discover you're capable of being. So that misalignment, so it's recognizing how much they form and shape each other. And then again, interrupting subtly. Well, maybe if I approach it this way, or maybe if I did this differently, or maybe if I, you know what I mean? And continuing to interrupt it, but it's recognizing that they are connected and that they're not separate. Because then now we're living, if we live and do things differently, then what we're doing is we're creating like a dual identity, which is exhausting. And it's this dichotomy of multiple selves where we're living different worlds within ourselves. So it's getting to be the one self in all of it and recognizing that who you are matters just as much. And I just want to share, like, with my children, they see mommy have to go on an airplane with a suitcase a lot. They see mommy having to go, and what does this mean to go sit down and write? What is that, right? They experiencing me doing things, but what I want is them to know, because I'm someone who fights for what I believe in. I want them to know who I am and why I'm doing that. There's an alignment that I have to keep connecting so that they can experience who I am and see what I do.
That makes total sense to me. 100%. My audience loves takeaways. If we could just narrow this down, like if you were to create like a 5 to 10 minute exercise for someone to be able to kind of gain more hope in their life and remain hopeful, what would that framework look like on a day-to-day basis?
Okay, well, I'm going to check back into that feeling framework, because what happens is in any moment where you're going through some sort of stress or some struggle, you can just pick one of them. So I'm going to list them out real quick. But for example, if you are like feeling really overwhelmed right now, you can ask yourself, what do I need? What would support look like or feel like for me right now? Or you could ask yourself, well, why am I wanting to hold it in? Or you could say, which is the habit of release, what can I do to get this out of me? Do I write about it? Do I talk about it? Do I sing about it? Do I pray about it? Do I call someone? Do I, what is my release, right? Or you could say, what can I receive? What can I make room for? Can I actually receive the love that someone is trying to give me right now? Can I receive the kindness from someone who's trying to tell me to be compassionate? Can I receive the words this person is speaking on this mic right now that I hope is possible? And then we can maybe repurpose, right? Which is, maybe anger's not bad. I'm a very angry person. I'm angry that I lost people I love to drugs. I'm angry that people I love have been and continue to get incarcerated. I'm angry when I look out into culture and the world, and little girls are questioning who, like, their bodies and their appearance, and guys are questioning their worth, and they're just people just questioning if they're good enough, and they're feeling hopeless. Like, that makes me angry. But I repurpose it. I recognize that feelings are neutral. It's what I apply to them. And then I skipped habit number 1, which was awareness, which we talked about, reflection and honesty. In this moment, do I just need to be honest with myself? To be honest with how I feel? Can I just be a little more brave than afraid in this moment right now?
Well, Dr. J, I love this conversation. Thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate you. I think the audience can get a lot of value out of it.
Thank you so much. I got so much value out of just learning more about you and your story and your journey. I'm very inspired. I'm very excited for what's to come in your journey. I don't know if you publicly announced it, but really encouraged. And I am really, really grateful to you for sticking on this very weird, windy path of using your experiences, your pain, and repurposing them to help others, because there's no instruction manual for this work. And it means so much to the world to have a voice that has been through it and is helping others navigate their own journey. So thanks for doing this podcast and for all the work you do and all that's coming up for you.
Thank you. I appreciate the kind words. It means a lot.
Why do you think so many people stay stuck in destructive patterns for years?
Because the mental health industry ignores the elephant in the room, which is that self-deception is actually the root cause of all mental health conditions. And if people don't learn how to accurately see those blind spots with the right structure, they can't see the